Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Perro, joined by my good friend and colleague, Melissa Corrigan. Welcome to Banner and Backbone Vet Talk. Today, we're going to be talking wounded and unknown. We've got some things we want to discuss around some of the stuff going on in the Caribbean, how it impacts um, things going on here at home. And what we're looking to do and help do in our country to move us forward and start holding members of this administration accountable in real time for their actions and providing consequences to those actions that are real, tangible, and impactful and can make a difference. So, welcome, Melissa. How are you today?
Great. And I gotta say, that's like the first time I've seen the new graphic there in the background, and I really, really love it. It's great.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad you like it.
I've
I'm fine with
I've
these
probably been
graphics.
on a vet talk and since you've had it, and I just never
Actually, you
noticed the
haven't.
graphic.
You haven't
Okay,
yet.
good.
So this is your first one. And we've got Stephanie
Yes,
Wilson in the chat with us today, who just had an incredible interview
she did.
um, with one of the I think the legal advisors at the Orders Project, who was able to answer some really good questions for Melissa, for others in the chat.
Yes.
Go follow Stephanie. She is a friend and colleague with us here at Banner and Backbone. Y'all see her every Friday um, on the Anti-Fascist Book Club with us, giving some really good analysis and discussion with her experience as a historian and life experience. So go follow her. She's in the chat. Hit her name. Hit subscribe. While you're at it, hit the subscribe button in the top left corner, and join Banner and Backbone, Melissa and myself. And we've got a really good discussion that we're going to jump into today. So, Melissa, can you give a bit of a primer of things that are going on and where we stand and what has happened that is publicly available that we all know about, that has happened since the start of this fake, illegal, unauthorized armed conflict,
Right. Mhm.
where the American government is and military are acting more like pirates than they are a police force or a military force, and are killing people in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. I don't think anyone's gotten to the Gulf, but in the Caribbean and the Pacific, Eastern Pacific, um, but
Right.
also the fact that we have some folks missing, and we've had some really serious allegations come out against recent activity, and we want to go into that.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that we can be chatting about this, especially with you. When I was in the Navy, I handled crypto and intel. So when I was handling anything of a classification nature, it was materials, it was books and tapes and physical materials. But you actually worked with processing detainees. So the situation that has blown up to, not to put a pun on it, but everybody has found out that there were two survivors on a boat strike, and Pete Hegseth has issued the now famous line, kill them all. And the boat was struck again, and we can assume that those two individuals were murdered during that strike. And that pulls us back to a previous strike in October where there were again two survivors of a boat strike, but in that particular instance, they were brought onto one of our Navy vessels, um, and then they were summarily repatriated, is what we were told. To one to Ecuador, one to Colombia. The Colombian president has said that the guy that came back to them was in bad shape, medically speaking, and we haven't really heard anything else from either one of them. The Ecuadorian president said that he released their prisoner because he could find no compelling evidence that he was involved in a drug cartel at all. So, for all we know, that guy is walking around free in Ecuador. But the questions remain of so, in one case, we see that the drastic overreaction of our military, the two surviving men on that boat, And then possibly on the other hand, we have a drastic overreaction of just making these two men disappear, just sending them back to their countries without any process. So you're the guy that is actually trained and has experience in how we are supposed to process. And I've been, doing some research and reading all morning on different policies. I've got DoD Directive 2310, that is the DoD detainee program. That's for March 2022. I don't know if that's the most recent instruction. Um, so, can you give me your walkthrough from your experience? Because we can all look at the regs and the policies all day long, but putting in practice from someone who's actually been there, walk us through what that looks like when you have a detainee come through the door. Let's go. What are you supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so I will make sure to clarify too. In I have not done detainee operations where they are in a detention center, like say Bagram Airfield, where there was a detention center and there were interrogations that happened. I am trained and have advanced training in interrogation and interrogation techniques. I have done processing for biometrics and individual scans on initial in processing of detained individuals in the field.
Right.
And being able to speak with them and assess their situation. And this goes into the heart of some of especially what we're talking about in terms of what should be available for record and what is missing on the record. And so one of the most important points one of the most important things that we do when it comes to managing and processing detainees is paperwork. That's
everything in the military.
Yeah, if for anyone who doesn't know what the military is, it's really just a set of paperwork with a uniform on it. That's all you do half the time is paperwork, is writing reports, is putting your name on paperwork, is signing documents, is transferring things between one person and another, and every single step on every single piece is documented. It is signed, it is documented, it is authorized, it has classification markings, it is moved in safe channels in a very process-oriented manner, because the military is all about process and procedure and practice and procedure and making everything straightforward. We had an acronym which was KISS, keep it soldier stupid, or keep it soldier simple. Because if the dumbest soldier can't read or understand what you're writing, it's too complex. And so that was the mentality I trained with and learned while I was in. So someone says bureaucracy. No, I say regulation. It's not bureaucracy to have a regulatory. I mean, it is bureaucracy, yes, technically, but it's not a bureaucratic system in terms of I'm not a bureaucrat. It's just policy. It's regulation that you have to follow so that random people don't die and random accidents don't happen. It's very important policies, and it's in very important procedures and regulations. And every step of the way, from when that detained individual, and I'm going to call them unidentified belligerents, that is a standard term, but it is not a legal term. It just means an unidentified person, an unidentified combatant, somebody that is not identifiable as either a civilian or as an armed enemy combatant. With that said, and with that in mind, before I go any further, I will frame the rest of this conversation. And I'm writing an article all about this, and it should be posted tomorrow. I'm getting review from Melissa. I'm going to be trying to get review from a few other veterans before I put this out, to make sure that it's simple, easy to understand, and straightforward. Is the important note is that we are not currently in a valid, defined, or declared armed conflict. We do not have a legally valid, declared, or armed conflict because Congress has not authorized an armed conflict or authorized war powers acts for the president and the executive branch. There has the regulatory backing behind it that is constitutionally mandated for any type of warlike action has not been fulfilled. There have been no reportings on any of the bombings of these boats and these strikes. So we're not at war. We're not in an armed conflict. We are just extrajudiciously murdering people, which has very strict regulations, even stricter when we're at war. In fact, it's easier to kill people when you're at war, but it's also very strict on how you manage and detain them. These are prisoners. These are detainees. It's just legal jargon, same idea. However, we're not at war, which means these are civilians being killed and murdered without cause, without due process, and without U.S. law or international law being followed. So let's go into this just a little bit on some of the really, really simple but straightforward steps that have to be followed. And then I'll loop them in with some of the regulations and governing policies that are around them. So, first of all, the DoD manual, specifically the DoD Law of War manual, treats unidentified belligerents or UBs as liable to capture and detention, but insists they receive humane treatment. Notably, when there's doubt about status at time of capture, the DoD Law of War manual requires that individuals are granted protections as PODs or POWs, prisoners of war, until a competent tribunal has decided otherwise. So there's a presumption of POW status until otherwise assumed, which boils down to, on an operational level, of units must document capture, units must document medical care, and units must document and initiate status determination procedures while safeguarding force protection, which means there can be security placed on that individual so that they cannot harm our service members, they cannot harm other civilians, they cannot harm or other UBs, they cannot harm themselves. It is for their protection so that they maintain life, because the ultimate goal, especially as a human intelligence collector, is to collect intelligence from that individual that can lead to the next step in that war or the next step in a conflict. Intelligence is gathered from the bottom up, basically. And if these individuals, these unidentified persons, if they were narcotics smugglers or terrorists of any sort, we would have held on to them. They would have been processed through a lot of paperwork, which every single step of the way is signed off from the service member who starts it to the person who receives it to the person who then receives it. There is a chain of custody that is maintained the entire way, physical and digital. The military still relies on physical copies being maintained in a lot of war or in a lot of places. And so during this process, what would have happened or should have happened was the Marines, who are the ones who received these individuals, who went out into the sea and captured the two UBs who were brought aboard a naval vessel. When the Marines brought those individuals aboard, they should have immediately checked for wounds and made sure that they were medically taken care of. That is priority number one. Like that, from Geneva Conventions, we have Geneva Convention 1, Article 10, which is all wounded, sick, and shipwrecked to whichever party they belong shall be respected and protected. Part 2 is, in all circumstances, they shall be treated humanely and shall receive, to the fullest extent practicable, and with the least possible delay the medical care and attention required by their condition. There shall be no distinction among them founded on any grounds other than medical ones, which means we treat them the same as we treat our own. So these individuals should have been treated until they were life stable and not under a condition of threat where they would die if they were moved, harmed, or in any other case. After that, they would have been in-processed in a way. Biometrics would have been collected, all their information would have been collected. And when I say biometrics, I mean everything. There would be a scan done that collects your face identification, your eyes, the shape and color, your fingerprints, everything. All biometrics are collected, just like if you were arrested at a police station, just like if you were arrested anywhere else. Except this stuff gets documented really thoroughly. From there, let me pull down. From there, after we have secured and triaged and evaluated, we document the capture and detention. There's paperwork that needs to be written, handwritten sworn statements that are then scanned in and authorized, sworn statements by every individual. After almost every mission, if somebody is injured or killed while at war or in any situation where service members are involved, a sworn statement is required, pretty much, as far as I know, especially on the intelligence side. If you're doing stuff like that, you're doing sworn statements. You capture and you document everything. From there, that person is then granted POW status, prisoner of war status, until otherwise said, which means they don't get released. We don't send them out. We don't send them back. They're detained and held up to an indefinite period of time where the conflict has ended. That is key also, is prisoner of war tend to, unless there is a governmental agreement that is publicly available on record, and a tribunal has occurred to affect the correct status of that individual, only then can that person be transferred to another country or to another entity within the US, say Guantanamo Bay, or into civilian custody if the laws that they have broken are civilian laws and not those of war. Finally, this is the most important part, and I've been talking about it through the entire time, is there is a record keeping and notification process through this entire thing. And none of that has been made available. None of that is known if it is in place. And we know that 2 individuals were released without any of this being done correctly, which is violations upon violations upon violations. Additionally, because we are not officially at war, blowing up a random boat in the ocean with no due process is called murder. The charge of murder for a service member to commit on a civilian is death. That is the penalty. That is the most severe penalty, and that is a penalty that can and is enforced in the military. A sitting service member, whether the Secretary of Defense all the way down to a private, if they are charged with murdering a civilian while not at war, while in uniform, while using military equipment, their penalty is up to death. And that is sort of the basis of where we are at this conversation. Is we know there are 2 individuals missing, like Melissa, you said, repatriated back to Ecuador and Colombia. Their statuses are unknown. There was no diplomatic process that was in place to transfer those individuals that has been made public record, which is required, also needs congressional oversight. A tribunal was also not convened to determine the status of these individuals. Those are made available for record too, that a tribunal was in place. And we have not seen or heard of anything like that ever taking place.
Right. And I wrote a piece a couple days ago on the Venezuelan fixer and the former CIA agent Gary Bernstein, who is pushing,
Yes.
the U.S. into war, and he's doing that using the MO that he wanted to use in Kuwait back in like 2009. He was involved with some businessmen and some operatives in Kuwait, and he had an idea for how to overthrow the government of Kuwait, and that was to start a PR campaign implying that the government was corrupt and that the government was working with Iran to develop nuclear weapons. And now you see this same exact man, Gary Bernstein, who's over here now in Venezuela saying what? The government is corrupt and they are collaborating with Iran. I mean, he just applied this MO that he was unsuccessful. He got caught, and he said that was all for funds. That discussion, that email chain where he sent out those ideas that came from him, that originated from a former CIA agent. And now we see a situation where he's applying that same MO that he could not apply in Kuwait exactly to Venezuela. And whatever we may think or think that we think about the president of Colombia, you've got the president of Colombia saying that he is holding CIA operatives who were going to implement a false flag. They were going to execute a false flag on one of our own ships. And now you have the president of Colombia saying that he received back one of these detainees essentially on life support, on a ventilator to survive.
Yeah.
And so both of these have been utterly sort of dismissed by our media, our government. I haven't heard anyone seriously talking about addressing the claims of the Colombian president. And I think part of that is this PR campaign that Bernstein has been so successful at making every single South American leader look like an insane autocratic dictator that that we collectively as the American people are dismissing what seems to be very credible evidence coming out of Colombia and the president, who he's trying to tell us what our own military is doing and our own government is doing in real time. And so I think that we need to be listening, and we need to be second guessing a lot of the intel that we are being fed by. I mean, Gary Bernstein is nuts. He has been an election denier that has been discredited time and time and time again. They proceeded with investigating some of his claims in good faith and have found nothing. I mean, his own former agency, the CIA, pursued every one of his claims for the stolen election and the machines out of Venezuela, and they came up with no actual evidence, and he is refusing to let this narrative go. And unfortunately, I think it's feeding into Americans and American media's willingness to listen to other South American and Central American leaders when they are telling us things that we may just now be finding out as information begins leaking out from these boat strikes. And like I said yesterday, if we are bombing boats full of narcotics, where are the narcotics? Yeah. They are not washing up on shore anywhere. And if they're sunk in the bottom of the ocean, wouldn't we see environmentalists starting to ask, hey, what's up with all the cocaine in the water? Yeah. And there doesn't seem to be massive amounts of cocaine in the water. So the facts.
And we talked about it earlier too. Yeah, and we talked about it earlier too, is like, if there was narcotics, Kash Patel would be photo-opping the shit out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Pete Hegseth would be photo-opping the shit out of it so that they could create so much propaganda. But there isn't. There is no evidence. And the U.S. is a evidence-based due process society. Right. That is what we are. That is what we need to come back to being.
We have to
in a much more efficient way, but we need to efficiently be due process based and evidence and fact and science and logic based. And that's what we're trying to do here, is yes, we have opinions on what's going on. And I want to get to an answer before we get to the end of this, because we're going to keep it about half an hour today. Because Melissa has time constraints and I have time constraints, and we want to make sure everybody gets as much info as we can possible. There was a great question in the chat too. And Melissa, I want your answer on this. And on top of it too, drug smuggling does not come with a punishment of death.
Right.
The penalty for drug smuggling is not death under US law, which means murdering people for drug smuggling is a crime and is punishable for over committing a penalty. There are punishments for too severe penalty being applied, such as extrajudiciously murdering someone means you're
Right.
a murderer.
Right.
And so there was a great question in the chat before we get to the end of our show. And just make sure everybody to hit the subscribe button if you're on Substack in the top left corner. Subscribe to Banner and Backbone, Melissa, myself, so that we can get more of this information out. I will be having an article come out tomorrow here on Banner and Backbone, where I am going to be doing the deep dive into some of these policies. And it's just it's a straightforward write-up where you all can understand what are some of the laws that are applicable and what do they mean in simple terms, such as what we talked about just now. Like, I read through one of the pieces of law and we talked about it in just a short little segment. And I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep putting more information out. We'll keep talking about the things like this. But to get to the question is, why has Congress not demanded this? Or if they have, what is actually happening? And Melissa, can you give us any updates on things you know
So
or may
I do
know
know
about
for
Congress?
I do know for a fact that there are some senators who have evidence on their desks today that they are reviewing. Mark Kelly has called for a committee hearing. I've been checking the the docket all day to see when that meeting gets scheduled, because I do anticipate it will be this week, if not early next week. I think it'll be this week. He's pushing to get that as quickly as possible. There was a closed door meeting today with evidence being considered. So this is on their radar. And to the point of why are they just now, after 83 civilians have been murdered, it's what I said this morning in terms of messaging for the Democrats, because Democrats have operated on defense for actual decades. And we have got to push our Democratic senators and congressmen to be more aggressive, to get on offense and stop reacting and start going out and demanding this information up front, as they have every right to do. Someone says, what do you need a hearing for? And the hearing is going to be to actually look into the orders that were issued, how those orders were played out through the chain of command, if they were lawful orders to begin with. And they're going to be examining the evidence of who got struck, the boats that got struck, and the detainees that were taken off of that boat. So,
and yes,
I don't understand all the ducking. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand the ducking and dodging either. It's very straightforward. But again, we have a regime that is totally that has internalized the move fast and break things ethos of the tech bros that are financing them, and that's how they're using our military. And part of the reason that Nick and I are so passionate about this, and Chris Goldsmith and all the other veterans that are working with us, is because this is enormously unfair and unprecedented. If your nation is going to have a standing army, the only way that works at all is if it is an apolitical, unbiased military that has the ability, down to the lowest infantrymen, to not follow unlawful orders. That's the only way this whole thing works. It's the only way we can have a standing army. And so when we begin to see a breakdown in that honor, because it truly is our honor at stake. And I know that if I were put into the position of obeying a questionable order, I would take my happy ass all the way. I had a TSSCI clearance when I was in the military. I was the crypto clerk for our ship. I handled all classified materials up to top secret and above. And if I was ordered to do something that I found unethical or against our laws, I would take it all the way up to the captain of my ship and tell him he could take that action, but I was not going to take the fall for it. And we have a lot of lower enlisted men. You got to remember the average age for enlisted men below E6 is between 18 and 22. So you have young people who really don't know what to think. You know, when they're given an order, they believe they should follow that order. And you have extraordinarily young men and women being placed in extremely dire situations out here in Southcom right now with an out of control drunken SecDef. And all the way down, that ineptitude is starting to trickle down, and the uncertainty of whether or not these orders are lawful is beginning to trickle down in the ranks. I have it on good authority that the Orders Project has had contact with sailors from Southcom. So we are seeing enlisted people begin to reach out to legal services to protect themselves and to ask and second guess, hey, are these lawful orders? So it's on us, the veterans out here. You know, I consider myself still a sister of our brothers and sisters on those ships, and I'm going to do my best to support them here from land, from a veteran's perspective, where I can maybe do and take some action that they can't take because they're still wearing that uniform. And I think that's why all of us are so passionate about this, because it's fucked up that they are in the position that they're in right now.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point, is we can take actions that service members cannot, because we're not currently in uniform. We don't fall under the same end regulation. I'm not a service member anymore. I also had a TSSCI, top secret security clearance, that I could, very similar in practicality to Melissa. We would have had access to different information because that's how it works. However, however, we also never abuse those positions. If I came to a questionable order, I asked my warrant officers because they were subject matter experts, and I asked my officers. I asked my enlisted service members above me, my sergeants above me. I asked my warrant officers, and I would ask my officers. And you were given the power to do that. And you have the power to do that. And that's a super important point. And one of the things I want to say too is there was a comment that said, simply put, Dems suck, while we were talking about the oversight. And I'm going to push back really hard on that, because the Democratic veterans who are in the Senate right now are doing it. They are listening. They are hearing. They are taking accountability and taking ownership of that accountability. And they are producing results and will produce results. And I put down the Democrats a lot in a lot of settings because I think they have a lot of flaws. In this one, I will not, because the individuals who are involved, such as Senator Mark Kelly and Senator Tammy Duckworth and others who are on these committees, who are doing the work that we are asking them and demanding them to do, I will never put them down for that. The Republicans who will stand with them for this, because if you think that the Republicans want to be known as murderers, especially those who served in the military, you have another thing coming. They have a backbone somewhere, some of them. And there are Republican members very openly standing up to Donald Trump and his regime right now. We need to continue to encourage them to do more. And that means we have to put faith in them.
Yes. And I think it's, I have attempted to reach out to my senator who represents one of the largest military presences in America, and he's wholly uninterested in actually discussing the plight of these sailors and Marines that are out there in Southcom right now. But when I reach out to veteran senators, they want to have the conversation. They want to see what we can do to support those military men and women. So look at your own senators and congressmen and look across the board and see if those who have worn the uniform and who have served aren't more willing to go to bat for our military. And then think about that the next time you go vote.
Yep. And to the comments of Majority Leader, Speaker has engaged the Sergeant at Arms to block Dems from doing any oversight. Can't do that. Can't stop them.
Yeah.
Cannot stop oversight. And guess what? The House has no authority to tell the Senate Oversight Committee they can't do their job. The Senate Armed Services Oversight Committee can and will do their job independent of what Mike Johnson and the House Sergeant at Arms think.
And we've already seen from Mark Kelly that he will, if he is not getting the traction he needs, he has no problem going to the press and getting in front of a camera. Which is
absolutely what our representatives and our senators should be doing, using the speech and debate clause to its fullest extent, because that protects you for legislative and your job's speech as a senator and a representative. So if Mark Kelly goes on TV doing his job, representing the people and putting truth out and providing the oversight that is needed, if Senator Tammy Duckworth did the same thing, if Senator fucking John Boozman of Arkansas, my senator, who is on the Armed Services Committee and I believe is the chair of that committee, if he went out and said on national TV that oversight is demanded and needed, it would be. That is protected. They could go out and then talk about it too, and what has been going on and the information that they have received about it. That's their job, and they will. And we will reach out to Mark Kelly and to Senator Duckworth and others to try and get them on with us for a show and discussion, because I think it's important if we can get individuals like that, especially from small reporting outlets like ourselves, who are working our asses off to get this type of information out to you guys and to make it simple and easy to understand in ways that you can then bring it home and talk about it. Like, I want you to be able to talk about the fact that these people are not enemy combatants.
Right.
They're civilians being murdered. And
that's a lot of the reason that I do the reporting that I do, so that when the next time you have that uncle or that parent or that person on Nextdoor or that person on Facebook, that you're educated and you can present them with facts, whether or not they go and pursue that fact or just burrow deeper into their delusion, that's up to them. But the more informed our American people are, the better off we're going to be. So the more we as veterans can inform civilians, hey, this is the way things are supposed to be done. So you can counter, when your dad or uncle or whoever says they're doing a great job, they're killing the narco terrorists, then you can come back with actual DOD instruction and policy and laws and say, hey, but they're not following the law. Okay. So if we're a nation of laws, because at this point, if you're allowing and even excusing the behavior of bombing boats that allegedly have drugs in them in the middle of the ocean to the point where everyone on that boat is dead, how are we not the cartel? That's cartel activity. There's no trial, no jury. Right. So you can't sit there and in one breath say that the cartels should be dead, but you're okay with America acting like a cartel or acting like pirates. You got to pick a lane, man. Pick a lane.
Yeah.
So the more
pick
people
a lane
are
and stay in it.
To push back, the better, we can push that because Democrats have to get on offensive. We have to be on offensive. We have to aggressively inform ourselves and go out and spread that knowledge.
Exactly. and we're on offense. That's what we're doing. That's what our reporting is about. That's what my article that's going to come out tomorrow is going to be about. That's what Melissa's work is about. I will make sure her article around Venezuela and what was going on is also linked in the show notes for this, so you can get additional primers. And then finally, before we close out our show, like I always do, and I know Melissa has a couple minutes left, so we'll get to Melissa's first, is I want to sell us, is come support us, come support Banner and Backbone.
Yes.
The only way we bring this show about and get folks like Mark Kelly and Senator Duckworth and others on the show, Chris Goldsmith, any of these professionals and these folks who are subject matter experts, is through your guys' support, free or paid. Just become a subscriber to Banner and Backbone. That's all I ask. Come subscribe, hang out with us, share this knowledge. Then next, we have my good friend, and I want her to sell herself because she's freaking amazing and does so much amazing work and is incredible at all of the investigative work. Melissa Corrigan at Counterstory Media.
Yes, our tagline is auditing the narrative one story at a time, and we're doing that by telling the truth. And I bring you the truth. I bring you from the ground in Washington, D.C. At least once a month, I go and immerse myself in one of the marches or rallies so you get a firsthand view, so you can see that Antifa isn't burning D.C. down, so you can counter that narrative already, right? When that comes up, you can say, hey, no, I watched a whole live stream of somebody in the middle of that march, and it was beautiful and peaceful and lovely, man, and they were singing songs. So it's important that I bring you the truth. When I get something wrong, I redact and I tell you that truth. A lot of independent journalists aren't out here doing it. They'll delete their content and move on with their life. And I'm going to tell you so that you are informed, you are up to date, and you have the most accurate information. So obviously paid subscribers help that. But honestly, if you can't afford that, just subscribing as a free subscriber and then share. That's the biggest thing, is sharing and restacking our content, because that's what I'm most passionate about, is getting information out.
Absolutely. And Melissa puts a counter story out there that's true, is filled with fact, and is impactful. She's a powerful voice, and I love getting to hang out with her. So go subscribe, and then come subscribe with me also at Sick of This Shit Publications. It's where I do chronic illness, community building, intelligent masculinity, and the narrative building to help form a positive narrative that we all want to be a part of. And I appreciate all of you. Come be a free or paid sub with me. It does not matter. All of the support helps. The biggest thing, like I said, and like Melissa said, is share the content. Share, forward the emails, send it in your text group, send it in your Facebook group, send it in your Signal chat, send it wherever. Put it out wherever. We even see some of the breakdowns on like where some of these links come back from and where people see our articles from. So we know you all are sharing our stuff because we see it. We appreciate it. We value you for it. And we're going to be bringing out more hard-hitting information, more news, and especially things that are going on around the illegal piracy that is going on by the U.S. government in the Caribbean. And we're going to audit that narrative. We have a backbone to stand up against it, and we're going to help stop these illegal attacks and these murders. And to answer the other question in the chat, they're all illegal. All the strikes, from the first to this one. It's just we need proof and evidence and hard facts to have a fact-based society that has due process. And that due process sometimes ends in really harsh sentencing. But that's the law. And we're going to bring it to you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please subscribe. Please join us. Catch us for the replay. We'll put it out with a bunch of notes. And look out for tomorrow for the new article that's coming out. Thanks, Melissa. Have a great day.
Thanks, Nick.
Everyone, have a great afternoon. Appreciate you all being with us.